been a few weeks since the end of Game of Thrones, and I've had some time to mull it over. I think everybody at this point can agree upon a few things. That the show went to shit, that it went to shit when it ran out of book material to adapt, and that it went to shit because the writers were shit and they only did good work when they had the books to handhold them. And these guys are in charge of an upcoming new Star Wars trilogy. Yeah, if you actually thought Star Wars was ever gonna recover, I've got a lightly used Blu-ray copy of Han Solo to sell you. However, a lot of people objected to Daenerys' story arc, specifically how it ended and how she turned into the Mad Queen. I've heard other YouTubers state that Daenerys was held to an impossible standard, that she wasn't explicitly evil in executing her enemies or treasonous actors within her ranks, in a world where that sort of thing is done all the time and considered moral, and to imply that her doing it when it was a sign of her descent, but when Ned Stark or Jon Snow did it, it was a sign of a strong leader, was just straight up sexism. Well, it was badly written, it was poorly executed, but was it sexism? No. When honorable characters execute people in Game of Thrones, they do it themselves. They swing the sword, they drop the noose or whatever. You know, they do it themselves. They themselves have to live with the burden of killing the person they sentenced. Daenerys doesn't do this. She has her dragons do it. Much in the same way that Ramsay sixes dogs on people, or Cersei uses poison or torture or whatever. They don't dirty their hands themselves. They allow whatever forces of nature they've brought under control to do the deed for them. And really, dragons are the weapon of mass destruction of the medieval world. And even in war, we recognize that a different set of principles and standards come into play when the capacity for widespread destruction is just that great. This is why I don't think the US is evil, by the way. If it were, our planet would be a ball of ash. So when Daenerys nukes King's Landing, is it out of left field? No, shit writing and pacing aside. Because she's been saying ever since Season 2, she's going to burn anything and anyone that gets in her way.
I am Daenerys Stormborn of the blood of old Valyria, and I will take what is mine. With fire and blood, I will take it.
Yes, my lady, but not with my ships.
Is it holding her to a hypocritical, impossible standard? No, because she doesn't act like the other honorable characters that her fans wish she was, and because dragons are a game changer. And is it sexist? Well, if you believed it was sexist, then you probably held up Daenerys as the archetypal strong, independent female hero, like a lot of nerdy feminists did. Maybe you were even dumb enough to own a mug or a shirt with something like, "I will take what is mine" on it. Or even worse, name your newborn daughter Daenerys or Khaleesi during the show's run. In which case, might as well have called them Darth Vader or Dolores Umbridge or something. In fact, it is quite interesting. This same SJW-friendly geek culture that so readily identified the seed of tyrants within legitimately tragic young characters, like Anakin Skywalker or Tom Riddle, got completely blindsided by Daenerys. They've all got special circumstances surrounding their birth. They're all involved in prophecy. They're all told that they're special, that their unique skills will one day change the world. And they all turned out to be evil. But unlike all the others, they just didn't see Daenerys' descent into madness coming. And I guarantee you in the upcoming elections, you're not going to see signs talking about opposing Daenerys the same way as they used Voldemort signs against Trump. Also, kids, you've still got to read another fucking book. Maybe the difference really is just because Daenerys is a woman, and that's why they didn't see it coming. They generally can't identify the obvious dangers in various female politicians IRL either. And they definitely can't see it in themselves or in their fellow feminists. Maybe the SJW evil detector shuts off when the person being scanned is a woman. Then again, maybe not, because those people often identify women like Shoe on Head or Soph or whatever as deeply problematic. I'm not saying Shoe and Soph are the same, they're very, very different, but they're both outside of the bounds of feminist women, which is maybe why they don't count as real women in this sense. And maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's because Daenerys was their woman, not just any woman. They were rooting for her. She's been heralded as a feminist and social justice icon since the first season now, a survivor of rape and of forced marriage, a visionary who wants to break the wheel of power, to break the chains of slavery, someone who has a clear, long-term vision of the future that involves building a better world.
I'm not going to stop the wheel. I'm going to break the wheel.
She is, in some sense, the avatar within geek culture. I hate that term and I hate that I have to use it. And having her turn out to be a villain probably felt like betrayal. Twitter is full of people who are just incredulous at the situation. Daenerys was the breaker of chains. She wanted to free slaves. How could she possibly be evil? This is terrible. No, it's worse than terrible. It's problematic. The writers are obviously saying that if an uppity woman wants to fix the world's wrongs, then she's the problem. Not a good look, Game of Thrones. But this is exactly what was always going to happen. The show makes it perfectly clear that not only is Daenerys special, but that she sees herself as special.
I dreamt
that if I carried those eggs into a great fire, they would hatch. When I stepped into the fire, my own people thought I was mad. But when the fire burned out, I was unhurt. The mother of dragons.
That she thinks that all of the legitimately miraculous things that have happened to her are a sign that she's meant to reshape the world. And she's going to take that mandate and make the best world possible, no matter the cost.
I'm here to free the world from tyrants. That is my destiny. And I will serve it no matter the cost.
I think this is the core of why a lot of SJWs are outraged at Daenerys' final end, because it shows the fatal flaw in not only her thinking, but in theirs.
I've served tyrants most of my life. They all talk about destiny.
She's a girl who walked into a fire with 3 stones and walked out with 3 dragons. How could she not believe in destiny?
Perhaps that's the problem. Her life has convinced her that she was sent here to save us all.
Ask any SJW why they're an SJW, and they'll probably tell you because I believe in equality and protecting marginalized voices and whatever. But if you really ask them, and you really receive the answer, they'll tell you a story, because everybody's got a story, fundamentally. We've all got something hidden away that's just as fantastical as Game of Thrones that drives us forward. Maybe somebody in our lives is sick, maybe somebody died, maybe you got raped, maybe your parents were in a brutal divorce, maybe you were bullied in school, maybe you failed out of school, maybe you have cancer or an eating disorder, or you lost a limb in an accident, or you have PTSD, or whatever. Everybody's got something, and yet we're all still here, aren't we? I mean, presumably, if you're watching this video, you're not dead. Leave a comment if you're dead. But my point is, everybody who gets roped into an extremist ideology like social justice thinks to themselves, I lived through all of that awful stuff so that I could be here and do this. I'm special. They might not think they're divinely ordained, but they might as well because they act like they are. So when the ultimate theme of Game of Thrones, however poorly executed, is people who believe that their suffering makes them special, turn ideological in their thinking, and work to implement paradise on Earth as a way to minimize that suffering, will end up killing millions of people to create the utopia, the people who actually think like that in real life take it as a personal attack against them. Because fundamentally, the feminists are Daenerys. Give any SJW 3 dragons and they will burn cities down to smash the patriarchy. The problem with utopianism is that it assumes the utopian's judgment is pure and perfect. They know, objectively, with zero doubt, what the optimal state of humanity is, for everyone. They know how to implement it maximally. They never make mistakes. And they're justified in destroying anyone who opposes them, or is even neutral to them, because humanity living in paradise is just that worth it. Of course, no human being, let alone an ideologue, is capable of perfection. But even if one were, it wouldn't be enough. It's not enough for Daenerys to be perfect. It's also that every single person working under her to implement the plan also has to be perfect. And just like I said in the last video, when the state starts declaring paradise is their goal, they become very corrupt very quickly, because imperfect humans cannot live in paradise. Consider this. Life is essentially suffering in one form or another from beginning to end. It's understanding that you're not perfect, and that there are things about you that even though you have zero agency over, they are still just as much you as the rational and controllable bits of you. Your mind is you, and your body is you, sure, but also your hair growth is you. And even though it's you, you can't will it to stop or start. You can't prevent your hair from falling out or from growing longer, but that doesn't mean that it's not you. You're a certain part emotional, you're a certain part rational, you're a certain part free will, you're a certain part instinct, you're a certain part uncontrollable disposition to disease. When you've got a tumor growing inside of you and you can't stop it, that's you too. It's often the case that people with a serious illness feel like they don't know themselves anymore. Because even though it's not true, we like to define the self as only the things we've brought under control. And that's what utopians and ideologues do. To them, humans are purely rational beings. And if you disagree with their rationale, you're just a part of the chaotic nature that needs to be brought to heel. Everybody knows the moment when you see an argument on campus or something. The moment where the SJW suddenly starts to look at the person they're debating with as less than human. You can see it in their eyes. That's when they've made the determination. I am the good and you are not me. That leaves only one thing that you could be. But if life is suffering, then even if you live in the utopia, you're going to suffer. And if you're a true believer in the utopian thinking, then your own suffering is itself heretical to your ideology. Why are you suffering? You're living in the perfect world we've created. Clearly the problem's you, clearly utopia is good, and clearly the people that created it are also good. So that only leaves one thing that you could be, after all. And that's when you get a trip to the gulag. When Game of Thrones holds up Jon Snow as the true hero against Daenerys' descent into villainy, it's making the statement that central planning of society is not the way forward. Where Daenerys has a bright vision of the future, Jon does the best he can where he is with what he's got. Where Daenerys is touched by the divine and uses that to justify her actions, Jon is touched by the divine and ignores it, gaining as little special favor as possible. Where Daenerys sees evil in everyone and tries to exterminate it all, Jon sees good in everyone and tries to cut deals, only resorting to violence when people have shown to be more evil than good. And yes, where Daenerys desires the throne, Jon scorns it. Game of Thrones is far from perfect. It's been an absolute train wreck for 2 seasons now, but it got the dangers of utopianism right. And all of the feminists mad about it on the internet for ideological reasons are mad because they think like Daenerys does. And they willingly sat through 6 episodes of all of their favorite characters telling them why they're fucking stupid.